Since I'm doing a video for every country going in alphabetical order, I'm starting with Australis. Conveniently, that's where this whole Minecraft world began. Hey guys, welcome to the very first episode in this Nations of Minecraft series, where I do an overview of every country in this Minecraft world in preparation for the great popularity contest at the Olympics. So, let's go right to the map. Australis, or the Republic of Australis, is located in the south of the world, which is why it's called Australis. Australis is like Greek or Latin or something for south, one of those smart languages. That's also why Australia is called that, I think, because that's in the south of the real world. So generally, it's divided up into like 5 regions. So there's the region like the capital city, then this orange area is the suburbs of the capital city. This sort of golden area is like the kingdom. More about that later. There's like a sort of somewhat of a kingdom, like medieval style, that surrounds that. And then if you go to the north, it's basically just wilderness with a few scattered small towns. And the 5th region is this island archipelago that the country owns. So, this is now all the cities. So yeah, this is the capital city, Regionala. And this is a very important city because this is where the entire world's spawn is. Every player who joins any part of this world is going to start out right here in Regionala. So that's why this country is so important. When I said this is where the world began, when I first generated this Minecraft world, this is where I spawned. There wasn't a city there at that point. But yeah, this is the global spawn. So yeah, that's the city of Regionala. That's why it's such an important city. And yeah, there are other suburbs of Regionala here. And yeah, so this area belongs to sort of a medieval style kingdom. Once again, I'll talk more about that later. And yeah, there are some small towns here, and there's one town on one of these islands. So, in the city, it looks very modern, very sort of urban, kind of like. And in the suburbs, it looks still modern, but not quite as urbanized. It just looks like normal suburbs. And if you go here, this does look more like a kingdom, more traditional architecture. Up north, up here, it's mostly wild. It's mostly like either forest or just like fields. And on these islands, a lot of it's just like shipping ports and stuff. So, yeah, the biome of the spawn, the city Regionala, is mostly like dead fields, but it's been transformed to be a lot more like vibrant looking. North of that, you have some thick bush, you have some emerald woods, and in the north, it's mostly pine woods and fields. There's some swamp, and the islands, interestingly, are all either volcanoes themselves or formed from volcanic activity. So this is the population map. So obviously, most of the population is centered around the capital city. This is the densest population. And here's the suburbs, which is a little bit less dense. And as you go farther north, it gets more and more sparsely populated. Except for up here, there's like a minority of people who live in the extreme north. We'll talk more about them later. But yeah, generally the rule in Australis is the more south you go, the more urban it gets, and the more north you go, the more rural it gets. I still can't pronounce the word rural, even though I'm a native English speaker. Alright, so this is the climate map. So the saturation determines the humidity and the color determines the temperature. So in the very south, it's very hot and humid. Here, as you go north, it gets more temperate. As you go even farther north, it gets hotter again, but then it also gets drier. So, this is an ethno-linguistic map of the country. So the majority of the people are Satkin. They speak the native language Satkin, which is part of the broader southern language family. And in the suburbs of the capital, there's some people called Zarths who speak the Zarthan language. The Zarthan language is also a southern language, but it's a minority, and there's some controversies with the Zarths. Some people don't like Zarthan people. And on these islands, they speak Proto-Southern, which is the language that most of the other southern languages, actually all the other southern languages originated from, but generally only like primitive people still speak Proto-Southern. Most educated people either speak Satkin or Zarthan. And up here, like we talked about before, there's a minority that speaks Southwestern languages. Southwestern languages, indicated by the color difference, are completely unrelated to any southern languages. And the reason that they're even part of this country is because of a war. We'll get to that. I'm sorry. I keep saying I'm going to talk about this later. So anyway, this is sort of like a political map. So the country's not really organized into states or provinces or regions officially. Basically, if you see a green, the green area is like a government administered city or town. So yeah, the green is like a government administered, but the orange is an autonomous kingdom. What an autonomous kingdom is, it is a kingdom that has a king that kind of runs itself, but it still falls under the territory of Australis. As you can see, most of the government administered towns are near the capital city, and the government doesn't really care about organizing the rest of the country into towns and cities because it mostly only keeps this around for like resource harvesting. And so yeah, this kingdom is called Majevan, and there's a little bit of controversy because we talked about the Zarths before. There's a little bit of hostility between the Zarthan people and the Majevan people. They're fighting over some territory because Majevan actually built a wall to keep the Zarths from expanding north because Majevan lives a very traditional lifestyle, whereas the Zarths live a very modern lifestyle, and they're kind of squabbling over some territory here. And the Zarths kind of have the government on their side because they actually live in a government administered town. And tensions have been escalating, but they're working to see what they can do to diffuse it. Hopefully, it won't turn into a civil war or anything. And yeah, so now let's get into the history of Australis. So as you can see here, this is an old map of when the Green Plateau was first founded. The city of Regionala used to just be a village numbered Village 13. I sort of founded it because when the Green Plateau, as you can see here, started expanding, we made a bunch of villages. And one of the villages we made was Village 13, which was the spawn. Its main function was to be the spawn. And then there was the Civil War, where we would fight over certain villages. So in the Civil War, it was the Green Plateau versus the Blue Plateau. Of course, I was the Green Plateau. And the Blue Plateau had control over Village 13. And we tried to conquer it, and we failed. So instead, we bombed the crap out of it. And there's still a massive crater there today from when we bombed it long ago. So then, eventually, the Green Plateau won the Civil War, and Village 13 was turned into the province Australis, and the village itself was turned into the capital city of the province, Regionala. And eventually the Green Plateau fell apart, and Australis became an independent country. Then later on, it started having pretty good trade with some other nations around them, their neighbors. The neighbors they traded with most were Kenaya, Sanama, and Hyperland, and they all specialized in different industries. So Australis specialized in luxury resources and architecture. Kenaya specialized in like rails, Hyperland specialized in redstone, and Sanama specialized in slave labor. Anyway, then there was a big war because Australis was harvesting a lot of resources, and Durlan wanted a lot of those resources. So Durlan got Sanama to help them attack these three countries, Klaskol, Australis, and Kenaya. There was a brutal war, and Durlan conquered a lot of the territory of all of them. So did Sanama. But eventually, Durlan made the mistake of going to war with too many nations at once. They went to war with all these other nations. And eventually, these red nations were able to work together to push Durlan back into Durlan. And yeah, that is how Australis got this extra northern territory, and that's where the native southwestern minority lives. So, if you want to visit, some notable spots will include the global spawn, the suburb of Regionala known as Barnathat, the city of Regionala itself. There is the Shrine of Poseidon on the coast. There's the Pool of Blood. This is actually a real pool of blood that still exists due to an ancient battle thousands of years ago that took place. A lot of blood was shed, and the Pool of Blood still exists today. There's also the Cave of Zakrem, an ancient warrior hero. Zakrem is supposedly was born here. Some people debate that, but it's a pretty cool cave nonetheless. There's also the Kingdom of Majevan that we talked about earlier. Even though there's controversy, it should be safe to visit, and it's a really cool place. There's the Bilshovik Woods. These woods are up north, and they're very pretty, a lot of cliffs and everything. There's the town of Equatoria, which is also located in the Bolshevik Woods. There are two national parks that are absolutely beautiful. These are some of my personal favorite nature spots in this whole world. Australis has a lot of really beautiful spots. And this is my number one favorite vacation destination, this tropical island. I went here in one of the Discovering the World episodes. You can check it out. So yeah, those are the notable sites of Australis. Now, let's talk about Australis's relations with other countries. So, Australis tends to kind of favor Iapeta in the fight between Iapeta and Durlan, because remember they had this war with Durlan. They haven't really forgiven them. So yeah, Australis doesn't officially take a side, but they're more inclined to support Iapeta than Durlan. Uh, Now, when it comes to their neighbors, Kenaya, things are a little bit complicated. On the one hand, they did both fight against Durlan, so they were comrades in that war, but lately Kenaya has been very friendly with Durlan, and Australis doesn't really know how to feel about that, especially since Kenaya has kind of hurt their economy. You know, Kenaya opened up the Nether, opened up the new Nether where you can mine gold, which caused the value of gold to drop because there's been such bad inflation. The quantity of gold has risen. Australis' economy was most of their value was stored in gold, and a lot of that's worthless now. So they're a little annoyed with Kenaya for making all their money worthless and for being too good friends with Durlan, but they still have important trade. So they keep an eye on each other, and sometimes they're rivals over who can be like king of the south, but they still trade and they're not exactly enemies or anything. But in terms of their best friends, Australis would have to say Klaus Cole is their absolute best friend. For the most part, they speak the same language. They were once part of the same ancient empire. Most of the people groups are very closely related. The difference between them is Klaus Cole is a lot more traditional, and Australis is a lot more modern, but they still get along great, and they've never had any conflict. Another fun fact about Australis is that they own the global railway system. So if you visit, not only will you spawn in Australis, but you're going to take the Australis-owned railway to get wherever you're going to go. So yeah, Australis doesn't always get all the headlines or the attention because they don't get involved in world politics that much, but still, overall, Australis is an extremely important nation, the nation the world originated from, and they're also filled with some of the most beautiful sights and fascinating history. Stay tuned, the Republic of Bodam is coming up next.